Hey guys, so I have so many ideas of like different things I wanted to do, and it was really hard for me to settle on one today. Was going in all different kinds of directions now that Gemini is out of retrograde and is direct again. So many ideas, and so it was kind of hard for me to pinpoint just one. Just like you Geminis out there, I'm sure have struggled doing. Um, but what I kind of just wanted to do something just to do something, but it's going to be informative nonetheless. I thought I would start out with um, understanding the 12 signs a little better through their major arcana cards and tarot. It really points out a couple of like key things that kind of give you more of a base knowledge as to like what the signs mean and represent. So I figured it would just kind of be like a cool little, hopefully shorter than most of the other videos I make. I do apologize for the length of some of them. Once you get me talking on a subject, it's really hard for me to stay focused and, um, you know, aware of my time. So I am just going through and picking out the 12 signs that are represented in tarot here. Alright, so I got them all, and I guess, like always, we'll start with Aries, since that is the first sign. Um, so, if you've looked at some of the tarot readings I've already done, I've probably mentioned some of these because I know a lot of them, typically come out in the readings, but this will be tying up all 12 in one video, so it's a little easier to access. So with Aries, we have um, the fourth card in the major arcana, which is the Emperor. Now, the Emperor, um, very Aries-like. I mean, there's literally rams represented in there, which is Aries symbol in astrology. And he is sitting on his throne. It looks like of all the cards, the kind of the most powerful or the most intimidating, and that's very, very true of an Aries energy. They're very bold. They are very, you know, um, aggressive to a degree. And once they set their sights on something, it's very hard to steer them off course, just like the Ram energy. And they're very action oriented. So here, this is somebody that means business. When he's focused. Now, when an Aries is not in focus, they're much more playful, a little more childlike. But when we come to like business matters or terms of warfare, when he's in an argument or something with somebody, this emperor is going to wear the crown, going to win the argument, even if it's not the most logical, because Aries coming first, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily the smartest sign, but they have a really, really good intuition, having that fire element. So instinctively, they know what needs to be done and what's happening around them and what someone's motives are, just because they're able to kind of perceive it in that way. So we don't mess with the Aries. Don't poke and prod at this. Like, pick your battles with this one because it can be very exhausting if you don't. Um, but the Aries really is about kind of owning the crown, being in that throne, and the throne is represented in all the kings. So when we look at the kings throughout the zodiac or the tarot deck, I'm sorry, each one is for four of the suits, and they all are tied into the emperor. And so when we think of Aries, think of a king, whereas Leo is more so a queen in a sense because it's more feminine energy. But that's debatable too, because a lot of male Leos can certainly get to really high position. But yeah, Aries is more of a masculine energy. But yeah, so that's that. And then the four, the numbers typically represent something significant in tarot. And four is the month of April, which is the month that there's the most amount of days in the sign of Aries. March, there's just about over a week, maybe 10 days or so. So that's significant too. Always look at the number, and do your numerology. If you haven't watched those videos I made, it makes it super easy, I think, to figure out that stuff, and it's really cool once you do. So we're going to go to the second sign. So the second sign we know to be is Taurus. So, we go from fire to earth. So we go from like this red and orange and those mountains and that stone, and it's really like intense looking, intimidating. It's very dramatic and scary almost, but it's more heated in a sense. And we go from that to kind of a more calm, um, you know, um, a slower moving sign here when we get to the earth elements. And the Hierophant is a keeper of keys in a spiritual sense. And you will find, like I often find with Taurus signs, that they're not overtly spiritual. Like they're not like preaching to you or like talking about crystals and everything, but it comes out very slowly. Like they'll have some kind of deeper sense with the world and stuff, and I think that's kind of more so what this represents, is that that kind of oneness with um, mortality and things. And so, Taurus can hold the keys. All the earth signs definitely are secret keepers in a way. So, they can really unlock a lot of answers. They know how to do that. But when we look at Taurus, we can see Aries in the 12th house of spirituality. And Aries, just like here in the Emperor, he sits in the throne, he rules, he's diminutive. So that is Taurus in a sense in the spiritual world. So you can find a lot of people involved in the church. A lot of people maybe involved in something more occult and not necessarily um, regular religion. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what you can see here with that Aries, and a lot of them can really struggle maybe with that stuff too, because Earth is more logical, it's more practical. It's not necessarily like an air or a water or fire even that is a little more involved in things that can't really be understood or grounded. So this is always an interesting card, because you wouldn't think an earth sign would be involved in the church and things like that, but uh, they tend to be, in a sense. And I think the way they kind of communicate sometimes can kind of be like that. You know how like pastors always have that like really that ease of like just talking to anybody, and it's kind of like a little like not scary, but off-putting in a sense. And you're just like, why do you feel so familiar, like just talking to any old stranger out there? And I feel like that's kind of how a Taurus can be. They can just be the one that comes in the line and just like starts a random conversation, or they just have that calmness, but also that like confidence. And that's very kind of like religious archetype to me too. Um, and it's just I think it's that Venus energy is just kind of blessing them with that charisma, and then that Earth practicality is just moving slowly but surely. And yeah, and then there the fifth card, which is the month of May. So the month of May, is going to be the month that you find the majority of Taurus signs. And so, yeah, so moving on from there, I'm going to try to speed this up a little bit. So we're going from Aries to Taurus to Gemini, which is the third sign, in the month of June, which is number 6. So we've got a 6 here, and we have duality here. So we move from previously the cards that have just one person on the throne, and we move to two people, not necessarily on a throne. They're not really in a seat of power or they rule over anything. Gemini and the Mercury signs are more of service-oriented signs, so you're not going to necessarily see any of them sitting on a throne like the fire. Um, Here we have masculine and feminine energy, which is very apparent in Geminis. Whether male or female, they're going to come across as a bit androgynous, and maybe maybe the male is dressed a little more feminine, and then the female is dressed a little more masculine, a little more tomboy. You'll see that a lot. And then just kind of the way they present themselves. So the females will talk more male and have that kind of like body language and stuff that's a little more stiff and assertive, and the males will kind of be a little more flamboyant and maybe fluid like a female. And so that's really interesting. Here, in order to have communication, you have to have someone to talk to or to have a dialogue with. And so there's that two energy. Um, and then we have here, a lot of temptation, because with the power of communication, you have the choice to do the right thing, the noble thing, or the tempestuous thing, maybe the not so good thing. And so I think that's represented here with kind of like the tarot Adam and Eve in a sense. Um, but there's definitely some gift to this union, and you can't, function without communication. So just think how important that is. But with the lovers, it's not necessarily that Geminis are always going to be in a relationship, but two is a really big factor for them. They can think in two perspectives. They have that duality, they can shift their mind into like different personalities in a sense. And I don't know exactly how aware of it they are all the time, but they can present themselves maybe as a little more calm and collected in 1 second, and then they turn around and then they are biting your head off or something like that. And so it's just like this complete duality that kind of takes a 180. And I think that's what this card really represents here. Yeah, it's not necessarily like a union with another person, but it's almost that duality within yourself. So that's Gemini for you. That air sign, that person kind of hovering there, that angel kind of blessed by the sky, blessing the union. So we go from Gemini, and now we're going to go to Cancer. So Cancer, here we have 7, the month of July, so that's primary Cancer season. Cancer, you see this really cool, huge castle in the background. Cancer represents the home and home pursuits, so family, mother, um, food is a big one, which food isn't so like apparent in the tarot. It's not necessarily that big or important of a factor, but all those things are associated with Cancer and the home especially. So here we have the Chariot. Kind of almost looks like he's defending the home, but I think he's maybe on a journey, a new path. Maybe he's running away from his home to, a new future, but it has to do with his home life and changing it. So he's making a decision here whenever the Chariot card comes up, and the black and the white is that duality that continues from the lovers, and it's kind of like you think of that crab energy drifting side to side on the beach, not really walking forward. It's not a direct energy. It's more of an indecisive nature when we move into the water signs, and so they're not necessarily um, they're not the easiest. They don't really understand how to exist in reality as well, because they're so far from it. They're subconscious signs, so they deal with a lot of deeper meanings and raw emotion and issues kind of beyond what's presented in the physical realm. So weirdly enough, you will find a lot of water signs that can be very harsh and very not action oriented, but very firm in their stance. And I think it's because they feel so inconfident when it comes to unsureness or making decisions. They'd rather just stick to one thing because that kind of gives them a little bit of um, stability in a way. And so we see that here. Um, Cancers are typically more of the fun, like fire or water energy. A little less serious or deep in a sense, being the first sign. It's more about motherhood and enjoying the family, those experiences and events. And then we have the breasts as well, which is represented by Cancer and motherhood. Obviously, that's very important in the role of pregnancy and childbirth. And so that's represented here. We have the moons here. I mean, there's a lot to focus on. There's even the signs there, um, which I think maybe plays out, well, they look more like runes, but they're almost looking like the signs and then the stars up there. So kind of blessed with that spirituality the Cancers are. You can find a lot of Cancers involved in tarot and stuff like this, especially your water signs. Not so much Scorpio, but Cancer and Pisces are very much into like tarot, astrology, those beyond this realm things that are kind of second nature to them. So we're going to go from the Chariot we go to the Strength card. So this is the first kind of, well, I guess the Lovers, if it said love, it would be a concept, but this is kind of like the first concept card. In Strength, instead of like an emperor or someone on a throne, here we do have two figures again, but this is really centered on the lion and the maiden. And so when we look at Leo in the month of August, which is the 8th month, they are represented by the lion. They roar for all to hear, they lead for all to see and to follow, and you see that bright yellow. There's so much yellow in this card, and again with the Chariot, I think that summer energy. But that yellow is really eminent of like the sun's presence and how illuminating it can be and how it sheds lights on things that maybe other people turn their back to or try not to notice. It kind of puts those into focus, and we have the lion being tamed by this gentle maiden, and so it strikes the thought that approaching something, a power of strength or a position of strength with strength doesn't necessarily mean victory. Sometimes you have to think outside of the box to really win people over or defeat that ego that exists within all of us. It's almost like reverse psychology in a way. It's like finding the way to approach something that's going to be beneficial to both parties. And so it's trying to find that way to appease both sides almost, and tapping into something that's natural to both. And it's showing that love, that tenderness there. And we're faced with the concept that maybe love is more powerful than brute strength. And I think that's what Leos really try to emulate. And they represent the heart, and with that infinity symbol above the maiden here, that's one of the 3 cards in the tarot that have that, that kind of represents a personality trait or a concept that's a little bigger than most other things. So love, is infinite. It stands the test of times. It's something that people can't come in between. Once it's not something that you can necessarily see or even feel to a degree, but it's something that exists and permeates reality. And I think that's kind of what that infinity symbol is. It's just everlasting. And I think that's the Leo's true strength, is love and finding that compassion for everybody, even when they're just being bold and aggressive and egotistical like a lion. So I think that's what's represented here. And we kind of go from that maiden figure, and we go into Virgo. So Virgo is 9, which is September. We go to the Hermit here. So we've tamed the lion, we've given it love, and now we kind of have to go on our own self-fulfilling journey, almost like a walkabout or something, and we have to find our own strength now that we've kind of given it or shown it to others. We have to remind ourselves of how we are inside. And the Hermit, Virgos can really, really be introverted and isolate themselves from the world. And those Earth signs, they're not so much concerned with other people as they are concerned with the natural world and the beauty of it. And I think Virgos, representing animals and stuff, they are much more akin to being familiar with animals and pets and things like that, as opposed to humans. And so we have this natural need for isolation, escaping kind of like their neuroses of social events and things that we're expected to do. And so the Virgos really kind of avoid those things. They avoid social interactions in a sense. Not all Virgos. I mean, you have a lot of actors are Virgos because they're able to master that kind of art of Gemini, that duality in their 10th house. But anyways, I digress. So Virgo is really about the self journey, and it's finding that thing that makes you different and putting it to use really finding that confidence, because I think a lot of Virgos, since they are so shy, but they really, really want to help others. And I think you can only help others when you're confident internally and it's truly an altruistic act. You're not doing it to kind of supplement some kind of confidence that you don't have or that isn't conscious in your own life. You're truly doing it for the right reasons, and I think that's what Virgo's doing here. Virgos love alone time. They don't mind being alone, so that's something to be thought of. As a lot of the other signs, they don't like to be alone. They can't enjoy that time, and I think Virgos have a lot of self-interest or a lot of hobbies that really kind of keep them in that space and keep their mind going. Because that Mercury is still a mind sign, and you see, like, he looks like he's deep in thought there. So, Virgos, similar to Leos before them, can kind of light the way or lead the way for others to follow, but this isn't necessarily a leadership. This is like a new perspective, a new way of looking things via like an internal confidence or insights. So, but Virgos can definitely share a lot of wisdom, and it's more of like a self journey here. So that's that. So we go from Virgo, and now we're going to move to Libra. So we've got the second sign of Venus. We have the from here we do jump from the 9th card to the 11th card. Yeah, and there are some jumps in the major arcana. It doesn't necessarily go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but most of the time it does. So we go from the 11th, which, 11 is like 2 ones, which in numerology would reduce to 2. And so again, we have that Libra, that balance, that power of 2. And with Libra, it really does kind of signify relationships. So we have that Gemini, that 2 is more the lovers, but it's more of the duality that exists inside the Gemini. Libra is really about the union, and it's about justice. So law, marriage is something that is, legal, and you have to go to the government to do that, and the judicial process and lawyers and how they can kind of manipulate the truth in a way is kind of Libra in a sense, and that they're really doing stuff to kind of people please or to be social or popular in a sense, but just making sure that they're doing it for the right reasons and more of a white lie as opposed to like a real and untruth kind of way of looking at things. So justice prevails. We have the sign of like karmic justice in a sense. So what goes around comes around. You'll find a lot of Libras believe in karma and like that kind of that concept that just will out. And we have the balance here with the scales. So the scales again represent balance, just like she's holding one object in this arm and one sword in that arm. They're kind of balancing each other out. There's a lot of just duality in this. There's the 2 columns here, and then there's the 2 colors that she's wearing, and then there's the 2 little drapes or sashes, and then there's a crown there for the enlightenment. So we see kind of all those personality aspects in the Libra, and that sun energy, that yellow, just kind of represents a more buoyant, a more extroverted sign that's at ease with engaging with others and just kind of making the necessary decisions. But Libras take a lot longer to make a decision because they really want to make sure that that scale is balanced before they act. So they have the means to act, but they're a lot slower to do those things, especially considering that they come directly opposite Aries, which is very action-oriented, very forward motion. Libra coming, exactly opposite and in the middle of all the signs is more so just like the Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio. Those signs that come right in the middle of the zodiac are more so faced with making decisions, and sometimes they can be really hard ones. I mean, just think of how hard decisions are to make in a law atmosphere. I mean, this could set up like years and decades of kind of like how to do things. So I think maybe they kind of approach every decision like that it's got like a universal um, like meaning, or like it's going to be institutionalized, or it's going to be forever attached to them. I think maybe that's where the fear comes in, and so they really need a lot of time to reach that decision. And I think a lot of Libras kind of opt for just not voicing their opinions and stuff, even though I think they have a whole lot of insights, especially being an air sign. They're very smart, but they're just so um, kind of focused on maybe being a little more involved with the pleasurable aspects of social company, as opposed to kind of the more justice um, aspects. So they kind of opt for having a little more fun than being a little less serious. So we go from that to death. So death could be a result of law and justice. Not so much nowadays, but certainly kind of in like this medieval looking tarot. um, Death is Scorpio. So Scorpio here we have the 13th card, and 13, it can definitely be a very not suspicious. What's the word? Um, Shit. What is that word? When you are superstitious. There we go. Okay. 13 is a very superstitious number, and here, we definitely have a lot of superstitions with Scorpio, and then what's really, I'm going to get off that tangent because that's not really going anywhere, but what's really happening in this card is big transformation. Whenever you get this card in tarot, it means that you're really reinventing a facet of yourself, or your complete life. Like you're just regenerating, you're starting over, you're walking into this new energy. There's a new path that's kind of presented itself back here, and sometimes the only way we're able to really go in a new direction is by letting the past die, letting things go, and that's really instrumental in Scorpio. They're constantly reinventing themselves. If you watch the Myers-Briggs video I did about the signs, I attached ISTP to the Scorpio card, and ISTP is all about transformation and just going into a new reality and involving yourself in a world that was previously unknown to you. And that's kind of what Scorpios do in a sense. And then you have the death here under the horse, and there's a skeleton. That maybe, the skeleton kind of survives and it just puts on a new skin almost. And then we have the rebirth, the children, and then the spiritual. So it's a very big thing that happens when you get this card, but it's very good. Look at the positive aspects of it. Look at the possibilities of a new future and a new path, especially when things aren't going well. So that's really the implication here. Um, it's not to say that Scorpios out there are murderers. It's just more so that they're more attuned to a transformative energy, and that they kind of almost, since they're just not great at dealing with reality, being that middle water sign and having all of this like subconscious meaning and awareness and this passion and this depth, and then having to make decisions with it, it comes off as very erratic and very volatile. And so that's kind of like they kind of make this necessary in order for them to survive, is because they can't function kind of in the day-to-day stuff so much, is because they have all this passion within them that's just waiting to burst forth at any moment's notice. And they're just not scared of those dark things necessarily. And a lot of bad things, when you look at the water signs, lots of traumas have happened to them, and I think that kind of molds their personalities from a younger age. And so when they get to adult life, they really have a lot more that they're carrying with them. So this transformation is really integral to Scorpios and the other water signs, to kind of let all of that's past and that's been past, but they're still just holding on to and haven't gotten over, and those grudges and all those traumas, really just have to find a way to shed those. And I think that's really what that emulates. So if you're able to do that, you can walk into a new way, a new spiritual path, a new way, sense of enlightenment with a Sagittarius energy. And temperance is another concept here, and it's about tempering is really about balance. So again, with like Libra, but Libra is more so about the law and justice. The fires aren't necessarily as concerned with the rules or anything like that, or um, those things. But temperance is really about balancing your emotions so that you can see the path, behind you or ahead of you for what it is, and really being ready for it. So, a lot of Sagittarius, and they just go, go, go energy, and they're always changing. And I think they opt to change their surroundings more so than focusing on themselves and inward strength. And so I think that's really the key for Sagittarius, is to be inwardly confident and not looking to like run away or to change your surroundings as a means to get where you want to be. It's great to explore and discover new things, and with temperance we have opportunity. So we have that path, we have discovery, we have illumination when we learn new things and concepts. And we become more one with the world once we travel it. But I think here that emotion is at the center of all things, and that's who you are inside. And so that's what's really at play here. And it seems like they really have a struggle kind of finding that emotional balance with all that fire energy that just kind of wants to go, wants to be a kid, have fun, wants every day to be an adventure. And we can't really do that late in the zodiac. We really have to take all of this knowledge that's been culminating and all the signs before it and start putting it to good use, especially with this rebirth, with this new sense of enlightenment. So a lot of times you find with Sagittarius, they become like professors or working in the universities, some form of like higher philosophical education with their new perspective after they've died. They've been transformed. They can kind of take flight and show others how to do that as well. So that's what's really there. There's a lot of gray, which is kind of like the decision. Once you balance that emotion, you can make that decision. So we go from Sagittarius, which is able to fly at any moment's notice, and we go to the Devil, which literally has chains around it, can't move, which you actually can move, and that's kind of the point of the card, is that those chains look rather loose. And so they say that this is more of a self-binding, this is more of holding yourself back from things in life. And so maybe you are your own worst enemy. Maybe it's hard for you to fight that temptation that was presented in the Lovers card, because here we have the Lovers again, but things have gotten a little darker and scarier. And so it shows that, especially with Capricorn in relationships, when we look at Cancer, which is its natural opposite, I often find like a lot of Cancer Capricorn relationships are like, are these two really helping each other along? Or are they just like love, like this like battle, like this like tug of war that they have, and they're always just kind of like crawling back to each other? I always think of like Kelly and Ryan's relationship in The Office. If you guys ever watched that, she is definitely a Cancer archetype, and then he's very much like a Capricorn, even though I don't think that's his true sign in real life. But I do think it's hers. And so it's just like kind of like going back to that thing that's bad for you, and it's really seeing that, look how dark and scary it is, and it's just, I don't know, I don't like getting this card. Even I hate it more so than the Death card, because the Death is all about like beginning again. The Devil here is just that temptation, and it's like you really have to try to find your strength to free yourself from those chains, and maybe find the right person for you, or see things more clearly, and not holding on to kind of like the more destructive tendencies maybe that the sign has. Um, and that's kind of what this is really showing. Um, yeah, it's a really interesting card. So this, Capricorns can be associated with a lot of more like occult stuff. I mean, we definitely see this with like all this pagan kind of like symbolism. Um, and so like you'll find that a lot. You do actually find that a lot of Capricorns are married to their religion for sure. Having kind of like Sagittarius is that discovery in the 12th house, and then Pisces in the 3rd house. So that's very something that they care about a lot. But you'll find like all variances of religion. And it could be more of a spiritual thing, but these will kind of be more so attuned to like getting into like witchcraft and like paganism and occult stuff, um, kind of symbolized here with the devil card. So, but that's really what it is. It's like being your worst enemy, holding yourself back, and just realizing that you have the power to escape, to free yourself from those chains, and to almost like not look at things that way and to see opportunities more so. I think the Capricorns, they're kind of like um, they're more skeptical. They're way less easily convinced than probably any of the other signs because they're so they're so stoic and they're just not, I don't know, they're just not really open. They're just kind of closed off. So, but those are some stereotypes. That's not true of all Capricorns, but it's just more so of like, just don't hold yourself back kind of a thing. Um, and really look at the people in your life and see if they're serving you. So now we're going to go from that to the star, which is Aquarius. And here, we have the stars. So Aquarius is a sign that's most often associated with astrology, astronomy, people working for NASA, space. They love sci-fi. Kind of all those things you'll find inherent in the Aquarius personality. Because that's kind of like the world they almost come from. They don't really come from this world. They're not really natural to this world, and so they have that water, that new perspective that they're blessing us with. Here you see like she's giving it to the soil and back into the water itself, so it can permeate and kind of like meld and shape and stuff. So it's like these new discoveries, this new way of thinking. This new perspective, and she's giving it to the people of Earth, and that's what Aquarius can really do for people. It can really help you see things in a wholly unique different perspective, and really kind of give you new insights and a new way to perceive and communicate with the world, and by looking at something beyond. So this is very future oriented, where we're kind of tied to the past here with Capricorn. And it's kind of, we love that, like that torturing comfort that it brings. But here, there are so many possibilities with this card with the future. And it's more about, yeah, going farther, looking beyond. There's a bird in there, air signs, and that's kind of what this really emulates. So this is the 17th. Yeah. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But yeah, the star. Here we go. I can't really say too much more about what the card is representing here. But, and then we go from the star to the moon, which is the last card. The last sign is Pisces. So this one, there's a lot going on. We've got the moon, and it almost looks like it's trapped in the sun or something, and it's kind of raining down. It's like what it's really doing here is distracting the wolves or the dogs, and it's this is an interesting card because it represents that illusion, that distraction, and I think because Pisces being the last water sign and having all these signs kind of playing onto it, they have so much personality, so much depth, so much understanding, but they just don't really realize what they need to do at the end of the day, or they find it really hard to do and to muster that energy. And so their strengths really rely on like subconscious meanings, on more like poetic kind of understandings and expressing themselves and having like this really complex inner world that they kind of create to kind of shield themselves from the outside forces that are so willing to penetrate their kind of like bubble in a sense. And you see here there's a path to go on. So we see all these paths, especially with the water signs, and that shows that they're constantly reinventing themselves, and maybe means a lot of times they're not at where they should be karmically, or they're not living their truth, and so I think they have to realize that again and again and not fall into that temptation that exists. And so with Pisces here, we're distracted by the moon. Maybe if we even think that the Pisces is the kind of the crayfish, the lobster, whatever that is trying to go down that path. And luckily the guards are almost like distracted at the moment. So maybe we can sneak by, but it's still really dangerous. What could those dogs do? Even though you have a hard shell, look how bigger they are in size. And when a dog gets riled up, and honestly, I find a couple of Pisces have actually had weird experiences with dogs too. Whether they love them and admire them, or they've been bitten or attacked by them, that it plays like a weird aspect of their life too. Um, and so here we have a path, but it looks very treacherous, and I think that's the Pisces mindset. Is it looks like at the end of the day, everything in this world kind of seems scary to them, or it seems like it's very very frightening. And I will say, I think all the signs, Pisces really has it hard. They've had a lot of like things happen to them from what I find, and that kind of put them in this mindset, and that they think maybe good things just aren't possible for me anymore. And they have to really remember that there is, and to not take the easy way, or to not distract yourself, but to kind of keep your focus set on discovering what it is in that path that's presenting itself for you. And yeah, to just not get distracted, okay? And to not use that distraction as like a cop out of like doing more for yourself or doing more meaningful things. But yeah, here we fall into that illusion. So Pisces can be hard for others to read. Um, and even though they feel others so empathically, they can really read others very well, but they present kind of an illusion because maybe they feel like that's kind of the only control that they have, is like um, not presenting their full self to somebody, or once they do, they're just kind of scared. They're just scared of so many things going on and happening to them, and that they just they weren't really meant for this world in a sense, because they represent so much subconscious understanding, and drugs and religion and spirituality that all takes them there. And so that's more familiar and nurturing to them, as opposed to um, living like this life and career oriented and families and things like that that's more expected. So those are all the 12 signs. I did talk a lot, so I do apologize. But 12 is a lot to go through, so hopefully you guys got some more understanding, and you can easily identify those when you're doing your own tarot cards, even if they're not with the Rider-Waite deck. When those things come up, you can think that like, hey, there's a Pisces or a Capricorn in my life, or coming up in this, or just that energy that kind of attributed with what I explained, that concept. So hope you guys enjoyed this.